Souls games are not all created equal, and if you want to master the dark and twisted world of Mornstead, you'll need to have a solid foundation. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today, after 100 hours of combined time in the game, we are sharing everything new players need to know about Lords of the Fallen. As with all Souls-like games, the first thing you'll be presented with is selecting a class. We won't go too deep here, as we already have an incredible video up on the channel that breaks down every available starting class, so go check that out when you get a chance. What you need to know is this: pay attention to your starting attributes, weight class, and weapon choices. While you can respec your attributes within the game for a moderate amount of vigor, the Souls currency this time around, saving those for more important things such as items, consumables, weapon upgrades, and even attribute enhancements is a much wiser decision. Attributes will define what weapons you'll be able to use and invest upgrades into, the weapons will inform your overall playstyle, and your weight class will dictate how easy it is to mitigate hits and use your dodge roll. These are all things Souls veterans will be used to, but make no mistake, your starting class doesn't truly limit you in any way, shape, or form. If you pick a melee class, then decide you want to lean into magic, you can do that. You'll just need to change out your gear and reallocate your attributes. Another thing we're immediately going to recommend is to use a controller. Can you play this on a mouse and keyboard? Absolutely, but because Lords of the Fallen actually has a number of new and unique systems, you'll quickly find that the intuitive button layouts make using all of the new tools at your disposal a breeze. We'll get into those shortly, but for now, let's quickly pivot and talk about combat. If you paid any attention to either our impressions video or our brutally honest review, you'll know that combat is the one aspect of the game we've been critical about. While we initially had some qualms with it, and make no mistake, there are still a few we do have, one of the most important things we've learned as we've progressed is that Lords of the Fallen is more action-forward and enemy-dense than pretty much every other Souls game out there. This realization really set in after we arrived at the swamp-like biome and were met with countless encounters with really high enemy density. At one point we had 6 or 7 enemies all rushing us at once, forcing us to abandon the typical Souls playstyle in favor of something different, unique to this game. Instead, Lords of the Fallen wants you to embrace every single combat tool available to you, no matter how cheesy some of them might be. A lot of the time, you'll find yourself asking, how can I just knock this enemy off a ledge or cliff to conserve my other resources? I know we sure as hell did, and at times, it downright felt necessary. Utilizing your kick by tapping both bumpers while behind an enemy will send them hurtling to their demise, granting you the full amount of vigor they drop and any items they may be carrying. Then there is the multi-hit combination. By tapping your left bumper and right trigger at the same time, you'll enter a much longer attack animation that strings together various individual attacks. These vary greatly based on weapon and even weapon combination, dealing higher damage and posture damage to your enemy, sometimes knocking them down outright and enabling a grievous strike. If you're struggling at all with combat, weave in a few of these. You'll notice the difference right away. Just be warned, these are much longer animations, and if your timing or positioning is off, you'll end up paying the price in blood. Speaking of grievous strikes, the sooner you master this system, the easier your life will become. With some enemies, it's almost a required tactic. Whenever you deal enough posture damage from your attacks, enemies will drop to the floor and a brief window showcasing a red bullseye will appear. Facing it and executing a light attack with your right bumper quickly will impale the target and deal significantly more damage, sometimes straight up knocking them to the floor again. Every enemy responds differently, so you'll need to learn those specific interactions. Finally, the most important system to really master is the Soul Flay. Targeting an enemy, holding up your Umbral lamp with left trigger, and pressing right trigger will quite literally pull the soul from an enemy's body for a limited time. During this window, you can deal increased damage to that soul floating through the air before it abruptly is sucked back in, converting the damage to gray health. If you manage to land a follow-up attack on the enemy, you'll chunk away at the health bar the full value of the gray health. But if they hit you first, they'll regain all their health. That's the exact same if we flip it to the player side. Any gray health that you have can be converted back into red health by landing attacks on enemies, but one hit from that enemy or any enemy and you'll lose the full value of the gray health. Soul Flay is fantastic, but what if I told you it gets even better when you realize you can actually dictate where that soul goes? Well, you can, and that does in fact mean tossing enemies off of steep ledges whenever possible, and that's a viable and recommended strategy. Using your thumbsticks, once you start the animation to rip the enemy's soul, push both in the direction you want to see it travel. It's not a crazy far range, but with proper timing and environmental placement, this skill can make short work of even the toughest enemies. Then there's ranged combat, and in Lords of the Fallen, every single class can embrace this if they want, thanks to a really unique system of handling an otherwise annoying experience in most other Souls games. In your weapon slot, you'll either equip a ranged weapon like a bow, crossbow, or catalyst, or turn it into a hand slot. Then, in the row below that, you'll notice 3 empty boxes to begin with. This is reserved for your ammo or projectile type, ranging from arrows all the way to throwables like grenades. This gives you multiple options to toggle between mid-combat and removes the need to collect different stacks of each type of ammunition in the game to keep your weapons full. Instead, you'll have one overall ammunition resource, denoted by the bar beneath your stamina, which can be replenished easily enough with ammunition bags or satchels. This makes finding new items like arrow types and hand-tossed projectiles much more satisfying because it'll have an actual impact on your gameplay and won't be expendable. While we're on the topic of combat and the tools at your disposal, we might as well dive a bit deeper into the Umbral mechanic and how those work. First off, make sure you're using your lamp to check areas around you constantly, as it's very easy to miss a ridiculous amount of secrets hidden in the world. Just be mindful of enemies walking around in Umbral that will attempt to grab or attack you. This will instantly deplete your remaining life and pull you into the Umbral Realm. If you want to leave Umbral, simply find this kneeling effigy with blue wispy tendrils, or rest at a vestige point to flip back into the Axiom Realm. When you're in the Umbral Realm, you'll notice an eyeball appearing on the right-hand side of your screen with a small white circular progress bar that slowly fills up over time. This is showing you the buildup of something called dread, and while it's explained early on in the game, the impact can't be understated. The further this bar progresses, the more enemies that will continuously spawn around you, and the higher your vigor multiplier will climb. That means higher risk, higher reward. If you stay in this realm for an extended period of time and that eye turns red, a special wraith will eventually show up that disables all healing and item use and will aggressively pursue you in hopes of killing you. However, if you do manage to kill it yourself, you'll receive some pretty nice rewards. Another huge aspect of the Umbral Realm are the parasites that periodically tether themselves to enemies within Axiom, making them nearly invulnerable and rendering the parasite otherwise invisible. You'll need to hold up your lamp to identify the parasite, but this time hold your right bumper while pointing the lamp at the desired location and watch as it drains the parasite's energy before ultimately killing it. Sometimes these points are hard anchored to the ground behind obstacles, while other times they're floating entities that follow closely behind an enemy. These should always be a top priority if they're in play, as they can make your life quite challenging if left alive. When you need to rest and recollect yourself after a fight, there is no better place than the hub back at Skyrest Bridge. Here you'll find a whole host of NPCs, and our first tip regarding this area. Make sure to exhaust the dialogue options of every single character that you come across, both the first time and after major story beats. This will unlock that NPC's full potential, rewarding you with either an item, a quest, information, and even vendor functionality. According to the developers, almost every major NPC has some sort of questline associated with it, so make sure to stop by and listen to what they have to say. You never know where that path might lead. One of the first bosses you'll fight and then vendors you'll unlock is Pieta, and she holds the key to upgrading your Sanguinarix, the Estus Flask of Lords of the Fallen. The cool thing here is that these upgrades are even more essential than your typical Souls game, as each progressive upgrade not only gives you additional charges, but also significantly boosts the healing effectiveness of each charge. As your health pool expands, this becomes more and more a factor during combat. In order to upgrade your Sanguinarix, you'll need to find the Holy Quintessence item. These are almost always found within the Umbral Realm at major places of power. Usually it's a tree or near a large effigy with a spot to soulflay. You'll notice a golden disc above the effigy's head if it's a Holy Quintessence reward. Be warned though, these are almost always guarded by powerful elite enemies in Axiom, as well as a horde of enemies and elites within the Umbral Realm. As far as weapon upgrades go, Grelinda will be your most valuable asset, but you won't have access to her from the start. In fact, it's very possible to completely miss her, and we've had a good laugh at the number of content creators we've talked to that straight up had no idea she existed. Needless to say, if you don't have weapon upgrades, your time in Mornstead is not going to be all sunshine and rainbows, so you need to prioritize this. You can find Grelinda relatively early on in the game. Once you're traversing the interior of Pilgrim's Perch, you essentially come to a fork in the road. One path will lead you down to a boss that will progress you further in the world. This will skip Grelinda entirely. The other path will take you to a pit with a cage in it. Inside this pit, you'll need to defeat the enemies to claim the prison key. Give this key to Grelinda inside that cage, and after resetting at a checkpoint, she'll head back to Skyrest Bridge and will be available for work. Back at the hub, not only will you be able to upgrade your weapons now, but she'll also kickstart a side quest to locate a number of runic tablets. This is a key part of the early game experience, as those tablets give you access to the rune system. Runes and rune socketing provides various enhancements based on the rune and piece of gear it's socketed into. The first rune tablet is in a secret tunnel at the end of the cave system in Fitzroy Gorge. If you run into the Ruiner mini-boss on the bridge, you have gone too far, so head back into the cave, up the scaffolding, and right at the top, turn left, peer into Umbral, and you'll see a pathway. Follow that until you reach the end, and you'll be able to pick up your first rune tablet, which you can turn into Grelinda for access to the rune system. As you use Grelinda to level up your weapons and shields, those items will gain rune sockets. You can only socket runes that match the shape of the socket, and those runes will provide different buffs depending on the type of gear they're socketed into, but overall, they are a key way to amplify your power level. You can purchase runes directly from Grelinda or find special runes from enemies around the world. Needless to say, unlocking and tapping into the rune system should be a priority as you progress through the game. The last major NPC we need to talk about in Skyrest Bridge is Molhu, only visible and interactable in his chamber within the Umbral Realm, and as you might guessed it, he is the Umbral Vendor. Here you'll be able to purchase an early Umbral Catalyst, various spells, and a whole host of other trinkets and consumables as you progress your character. While this is cool and all, Molhu actually has two significantly more important functions. The first is Umbral Lamp upgrades, which require an antediluvian chisel to level up. These are found in similar fashion to the Holy Quintessences, so always be on the lookout for clusters of difficult enemies in the Umbral Realm. Upgrading your lamp will increase your dread resistance and give you access to more Soulflay charges, significantly helping you with some of the denser late-game combat encounters. The second important function lies with Remembrances. These are tied to every major boss you kill in the game and are awarded after you extract the story moment from the stigma, which lingers after an encounter. Don't miss these, as these Remembrances are your key to some of the best gear in the game. However, before you can cash in, you need to pick up the Bowl of Revelations, which is found within Pilgrim's Perch, the first major zone in the game. Progress through the area until you inevitably reach this arena. Head into Umbral and drop down into a large encounter area where you'll need to defeat a host of enemies. Once you clear the gauntlet, Soulflay the effigy and you'll pick up the necessary item. Return to Molhu after acquiring the Bowl of Revelations, and at this point in the game, you should have access to Pieta's Remembrance, if you remember to Soulflay the Stigma in her encounter area. If not, simply run back and go get it. Each remembrance you bring to Molhu will open up a brand new vendor screen with unique armor, weapons, and even spells associated with the boss. To acquire a remembrance item, you'll need to spend Umbral Scourings, which you get after defeating any boss in the game in both single player and co-op, but you'll also get Scourings for soul-flaying the various story stigmas that you can find only within the Umbral Realm. Each stigma will reward just a few Umbral Scourings at the end of each animation, but there are dozens littered around the world. These offerings from Molhu are some of, if not the most powerful weapons, spells, and armor in the game, so don't sleep on this vendor and keep your eyes peeled. One of the other incredible systems Lords of the Fallen has is directly tied to the loot you can receive. Every enemy in this game uses unique armor and weapons based on their theme, and these actually have a chance to drop randomly from those enemies every time you kill them. Not only do you have a ludicrous amount of fixed gear spawns to find throughout the game, but this additional loot layer gives you a reason to head back to different parts of the game world as you hunt down the 194 weapons and shields, 76 spells and catalysts, and 339 armor pieces the game has created for launch. Additionally, you'll come across consumable items that can increase your item drop rate. The first item is called the Lucky Paw, which only slightly increases your drop rate. These are a bit more abundant in the world and can be found and purchased. We found that the spiky head enemies are a good source for Lucky Paws. For the second lucky consumable, we'll need to dive a bit deeper into our next section, Mimics. When it comes to Souls-likes, if there is one enemy that is rather consistent across the genre, it's Mimics, and Lords of the Fallen is no exception, albeit The concept is presented in an entirely new way. These giant carnivorous umbral moth creatures quite literally hide in plain sight, taking the form of a shiny piece of loot on the ground. If you've been paying attention to how an item typically looks compared to a mimic, you'll notice the mimic has a slightly bigger orb, a brighter glow, and the tail or flame flickers quite a bit more. If you attempt to pick this item up, the mimic will execute you, taking you directly to Umbral if you're in Axiom, or killing you outright if you're already in Umbral. Now, what if I told you the mimics can actually be killed pretty easily? Using your lamp, soul flay the general location of the supposed item, and it will automatically target the orb, rip the mimic from hiding, and kill it. This will result in the mimic dropping a Charmed Paw, a consumable that greatly increases your item drop rate. These are fantastic for farming out all the various items tied to enemies in the game. Just be aware any sort of buff-based consumable does have a timer and falls off if you reset at a vestige point or die. Be certain that item is going to pay off or you'll end up losing out on its effect. We have got one final tip for you all. As you're exploring the world of Mornstead, you'll occasionally catch a glimpse of these tiny floating ethereal lamps that have red moths fluttering around them. These are the souls of fallen Lampbearers and your key to collecting eyeballs, which can be used at a vendor in the chamber behind Molhu. Raising your Umbral lamp, target the red lamp and start a soul flay. This will rip out the soul of the fallen Lampbearer and it'll travel to a nearby elite enemy. This will supercharge that elite, giving them a name while also increasing their health and damage. If you beat this elite enemy, you'll be rewarded with additional vigor and a few eyeballs that you can use at that vendor, which holds a ton of cosmetic tinks. The current eyeball requirement for these rewards is a bit high, and we expect it to come down post-launch, so it might be best to hold onto those eyeballs. The question is, where the heck do you put them? So there you have it, everything that stumped us early on in Lords of the Fallen and everything you need to know as a new player. If you're confused about a system or just have a question about the game, be sure to let us know in the comment section down below. We'd be happy to help as you set off on your adventures to purge Adir's corruption from Mornstead. Of course, you can always join us on Discord if you want to talk about great games, enter for your chance to win free prizes, and connect with the team. That link, as always, is below. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.